Alright, coming to you live, it is your host, Mr. Lou, bringing you another wonderful episode of Highly Unpolitical. Now, on today's episode, we are going to talk about a very important subject that's unfortunately been in the news for, in my opinion, all the wrong reasons. Now, as many of you have probably been looking on your Facebook feeds, your Twitter feeds on the news, there was a situation with NFL football player Ray Rice involving a domestic abuse situation where a few months ago, in the early part of the summer, a video was released of him dragging his unconscious wife out of an elevator. But all we had at that moment was that piece of the video. All we saw was the body being dragged out. There was an uproar about the situation, and the bigger uproar was about the way the situation was handled, where Ray Rice was only given a 2-game suspension, no jail time, was allowed to enter a domestic violence program for his behavior, sort of a plea agreement. Now the issue kind of died down. He was serving his 2-game suspension. He was going to come back. And then last week, the earlier part of the video was released showing what happened before his wife Janae was found unconscious. It showed them arguing. And then in the elevator, which was probably the most difficult part of the video, was showing Ray punch his wife and literally knocking her out, and then obviously dragging her out of the elevator. And it was, for a lot of people, just this graphic piece of footage, and it really put into context what everyone had been arguing about for months before. And I say that it's in the news for the wrong reasons, because the conversation that should have been had months ago was being had now. And people who were previously defending Ray Rice were now turning their backs against him. And people who were sort of dubious of this question of domestic violence were now really starting to have a conversation. Now, on our show today is a good friend of mine, Anthony Rodriguez. Ant, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Lou. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Kind of concerned with not just the Ray Rice situation, but in my opinion, the way that it's been handled and the conversation surrounding domestic violence. I think what's scariest is in a lot of ways when people discuss racism in the same way that people discuss domestic violence, that we just don't have the language to have the conversation. What's been most surprising about the situation for you?
I mean, I want to take a step away from the football world for a second. Like, let's forget about football. Football comes second to these acts, and it's crazy to think that you have somebody that served this. The media, is giving us what they want us to know, basically. I mean, the funniest thing I think I heard through all of this, not that the situation is comical in any way, but what did people think a woman getting knocked out looked like? Like, how is it that this video has to surface for there to be more of an outcry and more of a consequence to Ray Rice?
And that was, and I think, in my opinion, I think that was the anchor of it all. And
right.
And you touched on a point that really frustrated me. When you saw that woman's body getting dragged out of the elevator, did you honestly think that he kissed her and she just kind of fell asleep because of the love? Like, what do you think happened in that elevator for that woman to have to be dragged out?
Exactly.
And that was the key that no one 3 months ago. The argument 3 months ago was, it was self-defense. We don't know what happened in that elevator. She must have punched him. So he had to punch her back.
Right.
What do you think about that particular part of it, the self-defense? Like, well, she laid his hands on him, so now he's able to just hit her.
Well, I think to myself, and I'll give first my opinion, and that is, based on my moral coding, based on my upbringing, there's never a time where it's okay to hit a woman. That's first and foremost. Now, does that mean that women have the right to haul off on men because they know there's not going to be any repercussions? No. I think to myself, even the way the statutes and the laws are written, there's no law written based on gender. It's assault and battery regardless. So there's nothing that says a man can't hit a woman. It just says people can't hit people, period. So this defense on man shouldn't be hitting women, yeah, I understand that. Why? Because, men are stronger typically, men are bigger, men have more brute force, and that should be understood. But the idea that it's because men hitting women, like, I think we all need to take a step back. So there's another situation that goes on here, and it's that everybody becomes an expert all of a sudden.
True.
Oh, And I put it out there earlier to a few of my friends and in other dialogues that I've had about this situation. It's that everybody on this Ray Rice is an animal Bandcamp, we should all take a deep breath and just fall back. Everybody becomes an expert and says, "Oh, it's probably not the first time he did it. He'll probably do it again." We don't know these things. We don't know them intimately. We don't know them personally. Like, whatever happened to the redemption story? Why can't we pray for that couple? Why can't we hope that they get the help that they need? Why can't we hope that they repair their marriage?
But the thing that we have to be careful in going through that particular dialogue is that most of the time, and I don't want to give any statistics, but most of the time, this behavior at this stage in his life is indicative of previous behavior. Because unlike, let's say, murder, where you're in a fight and you kill a man at times mistakenly or so on and so forth, hitting a woman is a pattern. And so, do we know if Ray Rice hit a woman before? No, we don't know that. And his situation could be particular. But from what studies tell us is that domestic violence, along with a general rape culture, is historical. It's a pattern. And men, in particular, develop these patterns in their prepubescent age. So when you're talking about 9, 10, 11 years old, you start developing a pattern of behavior towards women where you hit a girl and you're told it's okay. And then you get a little bit older and you squeeze a girl's arm and you're told it's okay. And you get a little bit older and you spit on a woman, and not only are you told that it's okay, she tells you that it's okay because she also thinks that it's normal. So I'd like for us to be careful in that. Now, the other side of the equation, which you did mention, I think it is important, is the redemption of him and them as a couple. And I think you're right. Domestic violence is a complicated issue, but can't we all just kind of, like you said, take a step back and realize that these aren't just these mannequins up there? These are people, these are humans, these are lives. There's children involved as well.
Yeah. And it's not to say that he hasn't done it or that he has done it. We just don't know the facts. Like, all we know is that on that given night, he knocked her out cold. And that's something to take very seriously. And that's something that, as a culture and a society, like, maybe we need to start addressing these things seriously. Because it only takes a celebrity to do this for it to become, front page news, national news. But
again,
all these other cases that are happening on a daily basis. And
that is a really just another important point where they become these watershed moments. And unfortunately, it takes something like a Janae and a Ray Rice, or let's say in the Michael Ferguson case, in the Ferguson case, where it takes a young black man getting shot, for us to then realize, wait a minute, this is systematic. Well, what is going on in our society? We're going to take a break right now to a musical minute, and I want to bring you guys a song by a wonderful artist called Master Ace. Check him out if you guys are hip hop aficionados like we are. Go back, get this album. This is called Brooklyn Masala, and we'll be back with more on Highly Unpolitical.
Met her on the corner of Gates in Bed-Stuy. It was only right that I approached and said hi, cause she looked like no other chick I ever saw. She was on the way coming up out the corner store. I asked could I carry her bags and walk her home. I could tell she was new in New York just from her tone, cause she wasn't that typical rude and ignorant, teeth sucking and eye rolling, telling me leave alone. We dipped and we yapped, we chit and we chat about this and that and where she lived at. Yeah, this may sound kinda Wu-Tang Clanish, but this butter pecan honey was not Spanish. She lived like 3 blocks from my man in New York for 6 months, moved from Pakistan. Well, that explains the strange accent and the strange clothes and that cute little diamond in your nose. She said, I gotta wear this gear every Sunday, but you gotta see how I look come Monday. Word, meaning I could see you again, maybe give you a call, take you out on the weekend. She winked at me and kinda laughed, ripped a piece off the grocery bag and wrote a math.
And we're back with more Highly Unpolitical. That was a song by Master Ace, Brooklyn Masala. Part of the reason we played that song is because, with this whole question of domestic violence and respecting towards women, I think it's important for us not just as men in general, but as a society to respect the women that are nearest. And I'll be very honest, and this is something that I haven't shared with a lot of people. I am a father. I have a 2-year-old daughter, and after my daughter was born, I became a lot more sensitive to the issues to women's issues. And it's a shame on my part that it took for my daughter to be born for me to become more aware of these issues. But I think the fact that it happened is wonderful, because I think about the world that I live in and how my daughter's going to have to deal with these things. I look at my daughter, she's 2 years old now, and I'm thinking to myself, what's it going to be like when she's 18 years old and she's out to find a boyfriend, out to find a husband? What's going to happen to her? What if her husband did this? What if her husband did that? How, as a father, am I going to react? I look at the way that men treat women on a daily basis. Anytime I see a man forcibly grab a woman, anytime I see a man make a comment towards a woman where he thinks it's a comment, oh, hey, sexy, oh, hey, you have a wonderful butt, hey, I become extremely sensitive of these issues. So, but it shouldn't just take Ray Rice doing this to his wife or me having a daughter for us as men to become sensitive to these issues. These are important issues. Now, going back to our topics, and my man Ant, I'm sorry about that small rant. It was something that...
No, it's important, man. We got to get this type of stuff out there. It's the open dialogue that more people need to be having and being comfortable with having. Like, we can't be so bravado and so macho all the time. We need to understand that, like, this is life and this is what's happening at all times.
I think that macho thing does have a lot to do with it, and this is a conversation that I've also had with myself. I wonder if I had my daughter was actually a boy, would I be so emotional with these things? And I think as men, not only are we forced, but we force ourselves to be macho and so on and so forth. But going back to our subject, it took a famous star like a Ray Rice to start this conversation. But he isn't the first major athlete to do something like this. Yeah, he's been the one, for whatever reason, to get the brunt of it. And there's two reasons, two important conversations that we have here is A, the media attention, what the media is telling us and how they're framing the conversation, and B, the general culture of violence towards women in general around the world.
It's crazy because, as I was kind of doing some research and just thinking about the case, the way the media's portrayed this one, like what happened to, I don't know if you heard of Jared Remy. Now, he's not a famous athlete. He's the son of
Jerry Remy, right?
Jerry Remy
yep.
for the Red Sox. He killed his, I believe, girlfriend or fiance. And that's a case where they had, he was a repeat offender. He already had a case about him for domestic calls at their home. And now she is dead, right? And that one, I feel like not necessarily being brushed under the rug, but it definitely didn't get as much national attention or attention on like Facebook and by everyone else as Ray Rice did. Now you've got a case in Africa right now, Oscar Pistorius, an Olympic runner, who was found not guilty of premeditated murder, but found guilty of culpable murder because in that country it's illegal to shoot through a closed door. He thought there was an intruder in his home. It was actually his girlfriend in the middle of the night going to use the bathroom. Behind a closed door, he shot, and it was actually her, not an intruder. And again, there's a lot to that case. I didn't follow it as much, and obviously there wasn't enough media attention for me to know what were the facts about that case. And we have another case right now that probably nobody's heard of. It just kind of came up during a Google search that I was doing. There's an adult film actress, a porn star. Her name is Christy Mack.
Yes.
She was beat up bad, but like the photos of that were terrible.
Yes.
She has an ex-boyfriend now who's an MMA fighter, a trained mixed martial artist who put his hands on her and like left her for dead, basically. Like based on the photos I've seen, I am surprised she's alive.
That case, you're right. That case, I think I saw that case maybe one time on a news feed, and then never heard any other commentary on that case. And I think what you're pointing to are two very important things. Is the level of domestic violence. I mean, I would say that, and having lived in Latin America for a long time, if for all of our Dominican listeners out there, there's a term in Spanish, feminicidio, which was a term created, especially in the Dominican Republic, that has the highest rate of domestic violence murders in the world. Where there's this culture where not only is it okay to abuse women, to beat women, to do whatever you want and not consider women human, it's not doing anything about it. And I think that is the part of it that hurts the most when you're talking about, domestic violence. Now in Brazil, for example, they are doing some things about it. There's a law that was passed recently that says that if you witness a domestic violence, you can call on behalf of the victim anonymously, and the abuser per se can be charged, and the victim doesn't have to, put herself through the pain and of having having to go to the police station. But it's this culture of just not only just violence towards women, but not doing anything about it, which the Jerry Remy case, his son, is a perfect example of that, where you had a woman who there was multiple times where this happened and then no one really did it and then she ends up dead, unfortunately.
Right. And that Christy Mack case, I mean, you don't even hear about this thing, but where's the outcry for her? Where's the outpouring on Twitter and Facebook for that young lady? I mean, what she's dealing with now. And I don't want to get into a total tangent conversation about, the hierarchy in society of like, well, she's a porn star. Like,
and I was going to touch on that. Would it be the fact that she was a porn star, that maybe she wasn't viewed as worthy of our attention because of her career choice, which then brings us back to the point of you're degrading a woman two times. Not only are you not paying attention to her, you're not paying attention to her because of her possible career choice.
Right, and I mean, it goes back to the old, like, well, if you're in this lifestyle, you're inviting this behavior. Like, what's to say that she invited a beating because of her lifestyle? Or, like, and again, it's just a total crazy tangent conversation that we could have. I don't want to take too much time on it, but I think that does have something to do with it. Just like I would venture out to say that the Ray Rice case is so big, maybe because he's black. Just throwing that out there.
It could be. There is a cross section, obviously, between race and a lot of these issues, but they're bringing race into this, and it's interesting. And I'm going to point this out, especially to our black listeners and to our Latino listeners, and especially the ones that defend Ray Rice. You can't defend Ray Rice on a domestic violence issue and then get mad when white people defend cops in Ferguson for doing basically the exact same thing. Defending the status quo. You can't defend a man beating a woman and then cry a foul when a white man kills a black man for defending the status quo, or people who supported that. So there is an intersection that's really interesting between race and domestic violence. I've heard a lot of Latino men, a lot of black men saying, oh, well, he's this and that, and, women should be mouthing off. Well, white people say the same thing when you have black kids getting shot by cops. Well, had he just thrown his hands up to begin with, he'd be alive.
Right. And I think it speaks to just, the overall taboo issue, like domestic violence. It is an issue, but you just don't hear about it enough. But interestingly, historically, it's just a part of the fabric of the society. I mean, we've all heard the idiomatic expression rule of thumb, but where does that come from? At one point in the U.S., it was allowed for a man to hit his wife with a switch as long as it was no longer or thicker than his thumb. And this was common law practice. It was acceptable before the eyes of judges. And it wasn't until like 1871 where one court in Alabama decided that they were not going to recognize it. And over time, that changes. But I think it just speaks to how long it took for us to recognize that, hey, maybe we are doing this wrong. We're only, a few hundred years removed from that. So now we're going to say, like, here's the next wave because things are only getting worse. And I analyze things sometimes and think, are we going in the direction of living in a gladiator state where we just want to see blood for sport and we just want to see the book thrown at people and we just want to see people thrown in jail because they're animals and they're savages and he doesn't have the right to live anymore? Like, it's crazy the outcry that you hear about certain things and who they're directed at. Because again, you hear it about Ray Rice, but you don't hear it for Jared Remy or Oscar Pistorius or this MMA boxer who beat Christy Mack.
These are all some just sort of different, interesting cross sections of the grander issue, I think, of domestic violence and abuse. One of the things that I think it's important that we point out is that not only are men culpable of the domestic violence, I also think the fact that we continually victimize the victim when we blame them for these things. Well, oh, she married him, so she's okay with it. There are psychological issues that are involved here that I think we dismiss constantly, where oh, well, she stayed with him, so she knew what she was getting into, or she's in it for the money. And it's interesting the amount of women who point to that. I think it's surprising the amount of women who defend Ray Rice. Now, I just, and sort of to keep the conversation just on point, there's a few other things that were frustrating about this issue and the way that it played out. Domestic violence being one conversation, but it's the way that corporate America has handled this, the NFL in particular, the way that the investigation went about. I don't understand how the video, TMZ is the one that releases the video. How did the NFL not see this video? If they saw the video,
because there's been, I guess the source has come out and said that they did send it to Roger Goodell's office, and there was an acceptance by Roger Goodell's office. Whether anybody watched it or opened it is a different story, and that's, behind closed doors. That's what they're denying, is that nobody saw it. But there's evidence that proves that the video was sent.
So now again, it goes back to this culture of not caring. Like, well, we saw it, we're gonna do something just to get you off our back, so we'll give them a two-game suspension, and that's it. This is a corporate responsibility that is huge. And the NFL totally mishandled this. There's a lot of people saying, well, Roger Goodell's not the one that hit Ray Rice, so why get mad at him? No, but he's also the guy that runs your company. And this is the guy that's taking the millions that we as fans are giving the NFL when we purchase the product. When you purchase a product, as the vendor of that product, you have a responsibility. And I understand that the NFL has this product that's based on aggressive behavior. I understand that. I don't think that aggressive behavior should go beyond, those white lines. And here's the last tidbit of this whole conversation that I think, and we'll close it out after this. It's the I don't agree but scenario, where I've heard a lot of men in recent days start off the conversation saying, I don't agree with domestic violence, but. And Stephen A. Smith, he's a commentator on ESPN, which I honestly think Black America should vote amongst itself and get this man off the airwaves, because I think anytime he opens up his mouth, I just think it's a black eye for everyone in general. I think ESPN should fire this man because he's an archaic, sort of backwards thinking, I don't even have words for him, but there was this basketball player, I forget his name, George, he plays for the Pacers, defending Ray Rice. Oh, I don't agree with domestic violence, but let this man play. Literally, like I don't agree with Officer Wilson killing a black man, but really,
let him keep his badge and his gun.
There's that cross section again. I don't want my wife getting beat up, but she shouldn't have put.
It also opens up this dialogue. If you're just the average Joe working a corporate job, let's say you go out on a Saturday night and you have one too many, and you maybe get into a car accident, get hit with a DUI. Does your boss have the right to fire you?
That's
something you did outside of work.
That's an interesting conversation to have. I don't know how I feel about that, because I think corporations are private. They are private corporations. They are governed by private laws. What do you think about that? Do you think that? And then going back on that conversation, he gets his punishment and then he gets retroactively punished a second time. Is that all?
I guess it's like a lot of other things. There's a lot of gray area in the ways that the law is written. I guess if we're talking about the case of an average Joe who's not a media figure, a role model to young ones, then I guess the law is written maybe in a way that what he does on his private time should not affect or impact his job placement, his employment. However, a case like Ray Rice is completely different. He's not an average Joe. People are buying his jersey. He's on the face of tickets when you're at the ticket booth, selling out.
Well, you're bringing in just a monster of a different conversation, whereas do public figures have a greater responsibility to us, the consumer? I think that's a subject that we should talk about in the future, because I think that in itself deserves its own segment. I want to thank you, my man Ant, for your commentary today. I want to thank our listeners again for tuning into Highly Unpolitical. This conversation about domestic violence, it is our first time talking about the subject. It will not be our last. Hopefully on our next episode we can get a woman's perspective on this, because I think, yes, as men we should have the conversation as we are having now. But I don't think that us as men having the conversation is going to be enough. I think we silence a woman every time we ignore domestic violence. We also silence women when we don't have equal participation of women on these issues, just like race, just like class, just like all of these other important subjects, religion, and so on and so forth. We can't just have the conversation. We need to have complete participation. So, my man, Ant, I want to thank you once again for joining us on the show.
Thank you, man. It's been a pleasure. I hope people get out there and just let their voices be heard on these type of topics. I think it's important for everyone to be able to, again, like I said earlier, we can't be too much and have too much bravado, to have an open dialogue and be sincere with our emotions and our feelings. How does this really make you feel? And don't be persuaded by, the taboo or the idea that, this is culturally acceptable. It shouldn't be culturally acceptable. We need to break down those barriers.
Definitely. So to all of our male listeners out there, please, take a minute out of your day to think about this, how it affects you, how does it affect your children, both male and female. To our female listeners, the same thing. Have the conversation with yourselves, have the conversation with family and friends about these topics. It shouldn't take a Ray Rice situation for us to have these conversations, but now that the conversation is there, let's have it. Again, for our fans on Highly Unpolitical, log on to Facebook, to YouTube, to SoundCloud, all of the digital media that we're putting all our content on. And if you want to participate, email us, and we'll have you participate as a guest host on Highly Unpolitical. We'll be back next time with more. My man Ant, thanks a lot. We'll be back next time with more from Highly Unpolitical. Peace.
Take it easy.